Thursday is here, and you know what that means. A brand new episode of Star Trek Discovery Season 3 has beamed down. This week we're talking about Episode 5 titled Die Trying. Hello everyone, my name is Captain Jack and welcome to Trek Central. The 5th episode of Discovery Season 3 is titled Die Trying, with it being written by James Duff and Sean Cochran, while being directed by Maja Villo. They've also directed the Star Trek Picard episodes The Impossible Box and Broken Pieces, which aired earlier this year. While we're discussing and reviewing episode 5 today, don't forget to hit that subscribe button to keep up to date on the latest Star Trek news, especially as we dive further into Season 3 of Discovery with brand new news, lore and more. You can also follow us on social media for more information. Okay, let's jump into this. As usual, a quick spoiler warning, we will be discussing the episode in full detail here with as spoilers as possible, so if you haven't watched yet, turn away now. This episode was actually a bit of a treat to myself, as it's actually my 22nd birthday today, so this came out, and yeah, it was a good episode for a good birthday, so thanks CBS. Anyway, opening this video, all I can say is wow. Star Trek Discovery as a series has had a rocky journey. From the first episode of Season 1, it's clear that this is not like a traditional Trek show that many Trekkies are used to. While that isn't a big problem, as new ways of doing things and telling stories should always be embraced from time to time, it did start the series off on a tough start. I think many of us can say that Season 3 of the series has turned to a more classic and traditional Star Trek feel, especially when it comes to the episodic storytelling we're getting with Season 3. The past 2 episodes have come closed in their own stories, but still pushing on one of a big story of finding the Federation and Starfleet. When I look at the latest episode, I feel it's very similar but not the same to the type of episodes we've explored before throughout the Star Trek franchise. Whether it comes down to the overall story, the episodic adventure, or the personal character stories that we're dealing with. Discovery's 3rd season is finding a great way to blend it all together in a well-written format that handles it well. Yes, some things stick out, however I think episodes like Die Trying work really well. The main guest actors in this episode, Oded Fehr as Admiral Charles Vance, who appears to be Starfleet's Commander-in-Chief, and David Cronenberg as a mysterious man fascinated with Terran information, did a fantastic job of portraying 2 brand new characters to the Star Trek universe. We'll talk more about these in our breakdown in a moment, as there's a lot to understand and process, but also a lot still to learn. As obvious as me saying this, we're in a different time and therefore encountering a different Starfleet, one that is trying to remain Starfleet to the core while adapting and living in the current situation it finds itself in. Captain Saru's comment about the Renaissance era fits perfectly into the story, hence what is mentioned and while the Admiral connects with it so well. The Federation is technically in the Dark Ages right now, yet there is light at the end of the tunnel. We knew from the get-go that Star Trek Discovery Season 3 would be about delivering hope to a universe that someone's forgot. And this episode displays why that is needed. The idea of Starfleet and the Federation is here, they just need a kickstart to get back on the swing of things and go in the right direction once again. Okay, with our initial thoughts out of the way, let's break down some very specific scenes of this episode to talk about, then talk about the episode as a whole at the very end. The opening to the episode features Captain Saru's first official log, I would imagine, or at least the first one we're actually heard so far. The Discovery arrives at what looks to be a distortion in space, but it actually turns out to be a massive cloaking field to protect both the remaining Federation and Starfleet headquarters. Inside the cloaking field is truly amazing, as we see tons of new Federation starships, mostly slightly seen in episode 3. But really well shown off, with some housing living rainforests, some housing organic components and theoretical materials. It's really nice to see all of these new ships, and particularly that loads of these ships have evolved from when we last technically saw ships of this class, or similarity in a way. Talking of the ships, we need to mention a big surprise revealed today. The USS Voyager lives on in Star Trek Discovery Season 3 via the 32nd century. The USS Voyager found this Federation Starfleet HQ, specifically the Voyager-J, around 10 generations later. Personally, we think this is a fitting way to celebrate Voyager's 25th anniversary, which took place this year, and is also fitting as Kate Mulgrew, who portrayed Captain Catherine Janeway, will return to the Star Trek franchise soon as Janeway in the upcoming Star Trek Prodigy series. We'll be discussing and breaking down the specific Voyager moments as we go out through the week because there's a lot more to discuss about the ship and hopefully we get a better look at it. Now in the centre of this massive fleet is a starbase which is being funneled energy by the rest of the fleet to maintain this massive cloaking field. The Discovery is hailed and the captain, first officer and Tal are summoned to the starbase. On this new starbase we get a good look at the new Starfleet uniforms, which are mostly grey with your command stripe going down the side of the uniforms. Very Starfleet, yet different, which I am loving. Not only do we see the standard officer uniform, but security uniforms and an Admiral uniform. Admiral Charles Vance, CIC of Starfleet, appears to meet the trio. Captain Saru learns that Kaminar did become a Federation world, sometime after he left in the 23rd century, which is nice to hear. Adira steps forward and it's clear that Admiral Senental, one of Tal's former hosts, knew Admiral Vance very well it seems. Vance reacts by saying Senen knew him well, and vice versa, but Adira does not. A cold and slightly no-nonsense approach like we just mentioned, but it does get the point across. The interaction between those two sort of reminds me of how some would react to Jadzia Dax in Deep Space Nine, especially if they knew Curzon Dax, their previous host. While Saru and Burnham are talking to Admiral Vance, it's clear not only he is dealing with a medical incident on the station, but also monitoring something else going on in the sector of space to do with the Emerald Chain, which seems to be ran by someone called Osira. Who this is, we do not know. We later learn that the Emerald Chain is a name of the Andorian Orion Syndicate, likely the one we saw in episode 1 of Burnham and Book at the Exchange. I have a feeling, considering they've mentioned Osira, we might see who they are or what they are at some point in the future. What I love from this exchange is Starfleet is still clearly trying to do its job here, just with very limited resources, as one quote makes a joke of later on. The Federation and Starfleet are still trying to do their mission, protecting those around them and sorting out disputes, policing certain planets and protecting those that need protection. While this version of Starfleet and the Federation may be different from what we know and the Discovery crew know, at the core they're still very much the same, holding true to those principles that originally started the organizations. Through the debrief of the Admiral and a creepy artificial intelligence, we get to learn important details about the state of the Federation and Starfleet. For starters, the Federation membership had decreased from its peak of 350 worlds, now down to 38. That is a significant decrease, considering that we know that Earth is no longer a part of the Federation anymore as well. We knew that by the year of 2373, there were around 150 members in the Federation, so an increase to 350 is very big. I'd assume the Klingons and the Xindi had joined by that point, as mentioned in Star Trek Enterprise. Additionally, due to the burn, subspace relays were down, and presumably still are down. Therefore, as we've heard mentioned before, contacting other members of the Federation takes considerably longer than it used to, not to mention ships are being relegated to no warp on occasion. Admiral Vance is also not willing to discuss the burn at this time, citing the Temporal Accords and various debates about the Temporal Cold War, which was mainly explored in Star Trek Enterprise by Temporal Agent Daniels and Jonathan Archer. Starfleet will therefore be requisitioning the Discovery for analysis and retrofit. I think the Discovery definitely needs to be a retrofit to be able to cope in this new future. However, because of this, Admiral Vance wants the entire crew to be debriefed, but also reassigned to serve Starfleet's needs. We get a good point of contention between Burnham and Sue in this episode, with Burnham wanting to do things by working around the system, whereas Sue needs to show that Discovery and its crew can work with the new system that they find themselves in. Later on, this does involve into a discussion between both of them, which is very key to I think both their character development in a way. We now get to the debrief scene, which might be the favourite group of scenes in this episode, which saying a lot of this episode has some great scenes. With how crazy and filled the last 2 seasons of Discovery have been, trying to debrief on them must be a bit of a nightmare. Starting with Dr. Hugh Culber, the man who was resurrected in a mushroom realm after being killed by a Klingon spy in the Terran universe, with him simply saying, "My murderer and I are good now," which definitely sort of made me laugh. It also relates back to the season 2 episode where him and Ash had a bit of a punch-up. Jet Reno is next, left alone on an asteroid as Burnham fell out of the sky with Captain Pike. Tilly starts talking about her experiences in the mirror universe as Captain Killy. Now, Georgiou's intention is much more involved than other ones, mostly because she was previously a Terran Emperor and in the mirror universe, though apparently they have a protocol for dealing with Terrans, which is nice. Georgiou manages to break the interrogator's holograms and gets the head interrogator to personally handle the interrogation himself. We learn there have been no mirror universe crossovers in the past 500 years, which would mean that Georgiou might be the last Terran we see. What is nice is that the Terran first contact with Vulcans is mentioned, as well as the fall of a Terran Empire. Meanwhile, Burnham tries to convince the security chief of the Federation fleet to give Discovery a chance to help the medical emergency on the station, by finding the source of a contagion and finding a cure. They are given a chance and find the infection started on a certain planet with a mining affected the living beings on the planet. Commander Burnham, using the Discoveries of knowledge of the past, know that there was a Federation seed ship that would have uncontaminated plant samples to help synthesize a cure. Surprisingly, and I really do mean surprisingly here, this seed ship, which is a cool idea, is transferred to different Federation members to be looked after, with it currently being in the care of some Barzans, Narn species, which gives us some good development for Commander Narn. They locate it, and much to my surprise it's still floating around all this time, and Commander Burnham takes personal command of the USS Discovery, while Captain Sue stays on the starbase with the Admiral. It's nice to see Burnham in command, as she definitely fits it. Now, upon arrival and retrieval of the ship, Commander Burnham, Dr. Culber, and Commander Narn beam over to the ship. Because it's synced to Barzan's atmosphere, Narn does not need to use her breathing apparatus, while Burnham and Culber do. Mature make away from his overgrown ship while some sort of cloaked being follows them. We learn that the ship was affected by a coronal mass injection from a nearby star a couple of weeks prior, and the only one out of a family of Barzans living on board survived was the father, due to him being in transporter phase while it happened. They managed to reverse the phasing of the father, and Burnham managed to convince him that his family are dead, sadly, and he can help them by making the cure and finding the seeds they need to use. Now, in a move I fully didn't expect, Commander Narn decides to stay on the seed ship to look after the irradiated dad and fulfill the ship's duty by getting it back to Barzan and finally returning home to a place she never thought she'd ever see again. She shares some very emotional scenes, and I'm glad they didn't develop her just to kill her off, Arium style, but actually leave us with the possibility of seeing her again. This will probably come back when the Federation is reignited and Narn managed to get Barzan back in the Federation. I have a feeling we might see a montage at the end of the season or something along that lines, where it shows Narn settling on Barzan, Mr. Hill getting his Federation thing. I'm also thinking one of those Star Wars endings where they show the planet's freed and celebrating. Hopefully not, but it could be kind of cool. Discovery returns back to the Federation HQ, Captain Saru and Burnham debrief with the Admiral once again. They still want Discovery to sit on the sidelines, as exploration is no longer a luxury Starfleet can afford, as they're no longer doing 5-year missions. However, Captain Saru paints the history of the Federation in the most wonderful light, by referring to the works of Gyatso, who ushered the Renaissance era. The period before the Renaissance was the Dark Ages, which could be what the Federation finds itself in right now, and takes someone like Gyatso to get the people into the entirety of an image to usher into a new age. Now, this is what Saru suggests to the Admiral, that the Discovery be allowed to stay together and give perspective to the rest of the Federation to help usher in a new golden age for the once great organisation. Admiral Vance agrees to let the Discovery stay together, but only goes on his orders by simply stating, "We're not in the Renaissance yet." As we close out this episode, Commander Burnham is walking along the Discovery corridors, where she finally encounters Jojo, who seems to be frozen in space, not really making much sense. First of all, I thought that it'd maybe replace herself with a hologram, maybe it's something else to do with her debriefing. During the debriefing with the unknown man, who's played by David Cronenberg, he doesn't have a name as of yet, he did mention that they had identified how to remove Terran genes or something like that, or gene splicing, or sort of a strand that basically makes Terrans Terran in a way. I'd have to double check the scene of what they make of this, but something's definitely happened to Philippa. Hopefully it's not too bad, as I kind of like her character. Now, as the episode started, it ends in the same way, with Saru and Burnham looking out of Discovery's window to the Federation fleet they find themselves in, happy that they're finally home, but also contemplating that they're not entirely home just yet, and it doesn't entirely feel like home. Okay, some final thoughts on this episode for our review. This episode had a lot to process, as viewers are sort of overwhelmed with brand new information, and there is a lot to take in, but that's a good thing. Certainly, we here at Trek Central are going to enjoy dissecting and talking about the latest episode and what it means, not only for Discovery going forward, but for the Star Trek universe as a whole. Finally, more information about the 32nd century and the new frontier we find ourselves in. Going into Season 3, we knew that we were going to take a look at some legacy Trek species, and how they might have changed over the last 900 years. And with Chill's last episode, it's Barzan's this episode. We really get our first listening at the Barzan language, which also with the Chill heard last episode was developed by linguistic Nick Farmer. It's amazing that they're taking this much effort to develop these species and lore in the Star Trek universe. I love it. The ship designs we got in this episode, even if they were first shown off in episode 3, were absolutely amazing. And who could have imagined that we would get the Voyager-J in Discovery? Maybe we might even get to see it in action in the upcoming episode, Unification Part 3, as that episode is written by Kirsten Beer, who as you might know wrote most of the Voyager relaunch novels. Honestly, I'm glad it didn't look like the Enterprise-J, but hey, stick around for a breakdown of that ship coming very soon with the Voyager-J and Enterprise-J. The seed vault part of this episode was very interesting, and a nice set piece for a ship overgrown with plant life. This section felt very much like classic Trek, beaming into a ship that has stopped replying and encountering a mysterious threat on board. In this case, it was an out-of-phase father protecting his dead family, which again felt very Trek and how they handled it, bringing him back into phase and simply talking to him about it. It wasn't one of these episodes where things, phasers are flying around, people are getting beat up. It actually was handled very well and written very well. Then one thing that did stick out to me is the known tune plot thread that they introduced last episode but developed this episode is interesting, as I can see this going multiple ways. Specifically, I'm referring to a point when Burnham was on board the ship and she hears the same music that Gray and Adira know, which is also she questions them on the starbase about it, and some of them on the Federation HQ know about it. In some ways it can be really interesting, especially if you get a Howard Saxon sound of a drums element from Doctor Who with it, but some could be worrying for the story, but I guess we'll have to wait and see how this goes. I wonder if this music was somewhat tied to the burn and how that was caused. I'm not entirely sure what to think about this yet, and I may have to give it some more thought. Okay, as usual, that does wrap up our weekly review for Star Trek Discovery Season 3. We'll be back next week with Episode 6 titled Scavengers. Of course, if you want to watch Episode 5, then make sure to head over to CBS All Access, where it's out now for those in the United States, or tomorrow on Netflix for those international viewers. Be sure to hit that subscribe button to never miss a video from myself and the Trek Central team. We'll also be live this Sunday at 9 PM GMT to talk and share our thoughts via the weekly Trek Central livestream. Tune in to join the discussion. You can also follow us on social media or join our community Discord server. For now, I've been Captain Jack here on Trek Central. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you next time. Live long and prosper, my friends.